Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine.
Hi, this is the 827th day of Russia's big war against Ukraine. I'm Joe Lindsley. I'm an American reporting in Ukraine every single day. From the start of this until victory, I speak for 10 minutes a day, every weekday, Mondays through Fridays, in Chicago's WGN Radio. 10 minutes a day to help you feel the reality of what it's like to be in Ukraine. Yesterday, Friday, I shared stories from Kharkiv city and region, a place I know well, where I've spent most of the past year, and which in the early hours Friday, the Russians hit especially hard, even as news arrives that at last the White House will allow Ukraine to hit Russian missile launch points on Russian soil to protect the city of Kharkiv. And despite a terrible morning in Kharkiv city where there were fatalities, when I spoke with friends there, that city still has this resilient spirit. People are not running away. As one friend said, as usual in Kharkiv, on a sunny day, people are walking around, drinking coffee, and donating to the army. So here is my report from yesterday to give you a 10-minute look at life and resistance here in Ukraine. Joe Lindsley, Chicago's WGN Radio, UkrainianFreedomNews.com.
Joe. Little Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
There is word this morning that President Biden secretly gave Ukraine permission for limited strikes inside Russia with U.S. weapons. Let's go to Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. Hi, Joe. What will this mean for the war effort?
Well, Bob, good afternoon from LVIV. This is, as anyone who's been listening to this broadcast for a while, this has been a major push by President Zelensky and by Ukrainians and people who support Ukraine to give Ukraine the ability to use weapons and ammunition produced in the United States. Because the key point has been, no matter which country donates weapons, fighter jets, whatever, if it's made in America, you need American permission in how those weapons are used. And the United States has refused to let Ukraine hit anything on Russian soil. But now, as we see, I think this campaign is working. Part of it is not just a persuasive campaign, but we see the horrible things that have been happening in Kharkiv city and in the Kharkiv region. And just, for example, last night, there was yet another terrible attack upon Kharkiv, missiles and aerial precision bombs. And when I asked people in Kharkiv, was this normal? Was it the usual type of attack? And the consensus is, yeah, kind of, it's normal. But this one just killed more people. It just happened to be more effective. And I spent the past few hours looking through a lot of video footage of the destruction. There was a 5-story apartment building. 3 of the floors were destroyed. And you can, one of the videos, you can see, you can hear a guy desperately, an older man, calling out the name of his wife, Sviata, and she's buried under the rubble. Mm-hmm. And there are, the death toll is rising. Children were killed, as well as adults. And this is, so the timing of this news, is welcomed here, because at last the U.S. is saying, and they're not, it's very sort of the step-by-step approach. And they're not saying, the U.S. is not saying that Ukraine has permission to use American weapons to hit Moscow. What they're simply saying is that that region of Russia called Belgorod, from which Russia attacks Kharkiv city every day, now Ukrainians can use these incredible weapons from the U.S., like the ATACMS long-range weapons, to hit the Russian military assets that are attacking them every day. And, this, up until that announcement, or until that approval was given, Ukrainians really had to wait until Russians entered Ukrainian territory in order really to hit them back. The only thing Ukrainians could do, they could use Ukrainian-produced drones, kamikaze drones, they could send those into Russia to fight back. But they were very limited, and I heard so many stories of frustration from guys at the front line. So maybe we can start to see some change as a result of this. It's taken a long time, but I think people are grateful that now this permission is here, at least in this limited area. And then I asked people in Kharkiv today, how is the city today? Because, the attacks have been intensified there. And, are people getting depressed? And I really want to get there as soon as possible. And one friend said, it's as usual in Kharkiv. It's a sunny day. People are walking around, drinking coffee and donating. So I was happy to hear that the spirit there is still incredibly strong. And when we look at this question of permissions, there's also the question of the F-16s, and there's a lot of debate about this. How effective will these really be?
Did we lose Joseph on the connection there? Sounds like it. I wanted to ask him about Russia and Ukraine exchanging 150 prisoners of war, 75 each. And is that the cause for any optimism there about possible peace talks, if they can agree on that? And then there's also a story today about China turning down an invitation to join the Ukraine peace talks that will be held in Switzerland next month. So some positive news and some negative news, as always, from Ukraine. We're trying to reestablish our connection with Joseph. If you've been with us for the last week or so, you know that just lately and suddenly there have been some problems with
1, 2,
Joseph.
3.
And we got you back now, Joe. I was just starting to talk about how we've had some issues lately, but I know you came up with a good workaround, and so far so good, except for these last couple of minutes. But we got you back now.
And I could hear you, but I was unable to speak. I don't know what happened. But this is, we see this is a very intense phase of the war. Russia's doing everything they can to crush Ukraine, and this is why we're starting to see maybe a new strength from the West on the prisoner exchange. The negotiations, there's no desire on the part of Ukrainians for negotiations, because after 2 years, they've seen who Russia is. Any attempt of Russia to have some kind of temporary deal, would simply give Russia time to get further strength to attack Ukraine again. And I think this is a point with the story of the F-16 fighter jets. Like, as I was speaking with, I have several friends who are some of the best F-16 pilots in America. And I'm talking, I asked them, like, why do you think that it's taken 2 years to get F-16s here? Is it because of training? No, they say. It's not because of really anything else besides politics. As one friend said, a former F-16 pilot told me, he said, I think it was politically convenient to say that the F-16s are approved, and politically convenient to stretch out delivery as long as possible. And I suspect, and I think this is the question to ask those in power in Washington, does Washington really not want to send these F-16s until, in their minds, there's some kind of negotiation, some kind of partition, and the F-16s would be here to defend Western Ukraine, but they would sort of surrender the East. And I think this is becoming clear, I think, to people that really pay attention, that the F-16s are, we keep saying, oh, they're coming next month. There's very little desire. But that said, the fact that Ukraine now has permission to hit places in Russia, Russian military assets, is extraordinary. And Ukraine, it took 2 years to get that, but there's really hope that this can. It's so needed in Kharkiv. It's absolutely terrible. If you look at those videos of people screaming, looking for their relatives in the rubble, that's happening all the time, simply because those people insist on living in freedom. I want to also mention a good story, a good piece of news. We've had so many listeners to WGN who come here to Ukraine, who donate and volunteer. And I know Jim and Robin are listening right now, along with LT and many others. Jim Gamache, he came to Ukraine several times to volunteer. And he sent us this note the other day. He said he was going to get his mail, and the mail lady was there. And she recognized his last name because he's been mentioned on the show before. And she listens while she's delivering mail in Chicago. She listens to this broadcast. She's probably listening now. And she said, oh, I just realized who you are. You were the one in Ukraine mentioned on Bob Sirott's show. And so this is nice to see among the listeners in Chicago, these great connections. And if you go to our website, UkrainianFreedomNews.com, or my Twitter account @JP Lindsley, we started this maybe crazy campaign to invite Mark Wahlberg to Ukraine because, he's, a lot of Americans respect him. And as opposed to many others in Hollywood, I think middle Americans, like someone like Mark Wahlberg. And every Sunday he makes a video in front of a different church. He's famous for going to his 3 a.m. workouts and then going to mass. And so we made this campaign to encourage him to come to the ruined churches of Ukraine. But this is part of the efforts of many Ukrainians to really try in creative ways to get Americans to see that Ukrainians and Americans have so much in common. This is a case they're trying to make, and I think this is also why, with this news about Trump, Trump's conviction, Ukrainians and President Zelensky are very careful about that. They're not celebrating it because they do know, that Trump could very well be president. And so I'd say the attitude here is really just focused on trying to win and try to be respectful of people of all different political parties so that they can get support to stop Russia.
Joseph, as you know, we're not shy about sharing complaints we get about these reports. Some people say, why are we doing it? So let me end with this text. Bob, do these people who want you to stop having Joe on realize that Putin has no intention on stopping at Ukraine? If Ukraine falls, Poland is next. Open your eyes, people. I look forward to Joseph's conversations every morning. My late father-in-law fled Ukraine in the early 1900s. On that nice note, I'll hope you have a peaceful weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?